Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome today to this BPCA webinar talking about pesticide labels. Glad to see we have a lot of you here today. So we've got 239, 240, we're ticking up still. So great to still see that you're all joining. Do a little introduction just for a couple of minutes, and it allows anybody else that wants to take part to get that joining button clicked. Fabulous. You know what as well, really great to see we've got a whole mixture of people around the world by the looks of it. We've got Germany and Middle East and everywhere around the UK, Scotland, Northern Ireland, obviously England as well, and Wales. So really great to see everybody joining. And I think that, is a testament to this is a subject that we all just want to make sure we are along the right lines, understanding labels properly, because it's really important, isn't it? And hence why we do these webinars. We try and pick subjects that I think are going to be, or we think that's going to be important to you for day to day. Now, in terms of what we're going to cover, just to give you some expectations. So, we've got an hour today, as always, and I think this will be really useful, especially to those that are new to the industry and want to understand labels a bit more and their importance. But also, if you've been in the industry 20, 30 years, it's still really important to keep up to date with that, okay, I'm doing the right thing and I understand what those labels are. And maybe there's some bits in here that you'll think to yourself, oh, I forgot about that. And actually, that's some good information that I can go and find. So, and yes, it's very cold today. Some comments in the chat section. It is particularly chilly. Hence why I've got my thermal top on today. Apparently I look like Steve Jobs, Kat, our tech support, mentioned to me earlier. So great. Good to see you all. Just as a quick introduction, I put it in the chat section just a moment ago, but there's one CPD point for today. If you are watching this recorded and it's not live, then you will need to go and register that point with your relevant CPD scheme. Okay, just speak to the support in whichever scheme you're with, and they'll help you get that registered. Chat section, most of you have been chatting, and probably those that haven't, you've seen some bits coming up in the chat section. So yeah, use it for exactly as you have been. But also, if you have any technical issues, so sound or video, then pop it in there. And Kat, who's sitting there as technical support for me, will give you some pointers on how to solve it. Normally it's switch it off, switch it on, but we'll see how that goes. And hopefully I won't have any problems. But again, we'll get it sorted. You're all used to these things now. I think as well, we've got a couple of people that are brand new to Zoom. So hopefully, or to webinars, and hopefully I don't disappoint. Of course, if there's any constructive feedback, we love it. Positive feedback, we love it. So please do make sure you let us know how today went and any topics that you would like us to cover in the future. Additional to the chat section, we've got a Q&A bit. Again, I've seen a couple of people popped a few questions in there already. So that area is for questions to me. At the end of the webinar today, I'll do however long we've got left, up to 1:30, to do some questions, maybe things that you think I haven't covered and you wanted to know about. Just as a heads up, I can't talk about products specifically. Active ingredients and things like that we can maybe talk a little bit about, but really this is generally regarding labels and what they mean and why they're important, rather than focus on specific products. But we'll see what questions come out and I'll point in the right direction if we need to. Just a reminder as well, we've got Pest coming up in March 15th to the 17th. So anybody that's here that hasn't already registered, please do. There's prizes to be won for pre-registration. I think it's a PS5 actually. Managed to get hold of one. If it's not, then I'm not putting myself up to purchasing one just because I've told you that you get one. But yes, you'll go into a prize draw to win a PS5 if you pre-register. That would be great. Any questions, just ring the Pest team, our events team. Okay, I think that's about it. Just a reminder, I can't see you, of course, and I can't hear you. So again, chat section for general bits and pieces or information you want, and then the Q&A section for questions to me, okay, because that's where I'll see it. Great, okay, without further ado, I will get my presentation shared just so we can get a bit of visual there. And I'll make an assumption that everything's going smoothly and you can see my screen here, unless Kat pops up and lets me know otherwise. So yes, know your pesticide labels, really important. too often we see evidence that labels are maybe not read enough, and certainly, not really understood in terms of not just their importance, but, the content of it and actually how helpful they can be. So, this webinar really is for the users of pesticides, and it'll help you understand why you need to be in the know about, what you're using. So if you're using pesticides, maybe some of you, I don't know, there might be some suppliers here and people like that, still useful, of course, but certainly for the users of it, when you're out there doing your thing, doing your pest management, really important to you guys. Okay. Fabulous. So the agenda today, we're going to be talking about label law and structure, of course, the common terms that we might see on there, and possibly their meaning as well. MSDS, so manufacturer's safety data sheets. I'll go into those a little bit. Today's not about safety data sheets, but certainly they are important when we get to things like COSH assessments. And as I mentioned, questions at the end. Hopefully I can keep on time. Possibly I'll run over by a few minutes, but we'll see how many questions that you get in. I can see there's 2 in there already. There's a possibility sometimes these questions come out before I've covered a certain topic, but actually by the time we get to the end, it's all been covered. So we'll see what those questions come out with. Do like some challenging ones, not too challenging, mind. Okay, so label law, really important because of course you need to know that the label is the law. Now, in terms of the regulators for pesticides, the Health and Safety Executive, the HSE, is the national regulator for the UK. So it's on behalf of all of the UK government and the devolved administration. So they're the ones that are responsible for regulating pesticides in the UK. Now, it's enforcing regulations, so sometimes they can devolve these responsibilities to local authorities and things like that, but they are ultimately responsible for enforcing regulations around pesticides approval and use. Also, they want to ensure that only authorised products can be marketed. They do this through an approval process. So, for example, if you wanted to buy something from another country that's outside the UK, that would not be something that you would be able to legally use in the UK unless it had been authorised here by HSE within the UK. Also ensuring products are used in a suitable fashion, because of course, these things are authorised for particular uses. So, we need to know, or the HSE need to know that these products are used in a suitable way that's going to keep everybody safe and the environment safe. And also monitoring the impact of chemicals, because this really helps them to make decisions or make better decisions on what chemicals they approve for use in the UK. Okay, so they're always monitoring these things. Okay. And so how do HSE do this? Excuse me. So we have something called the Chemicals Regulation Division, CRD for short. And it's responsible for the regulation of biocides. CRD is something within HSE, and there's lots of abbreviations here, so we get that. And I'm only covering this briefly just to give you some direction and understanding that, how important that label is. But yeah, the CRD, they're responsible for the regulation of biocides, pesticides, detergents, any chemicals really, and also for the compliance with certain labelling and packaging and classification. And this translates onto the labels that we see, the products you've got in your van, the products you've got in your store, the products you talk to your suppliers about, all of those chemicals of, all of this information, all of this approval that CRD and HSE do translates into that label. And they are the things that you need to make sure you are aware of and you follow. But as I said before, if I was to develop Natalie's sprayable spray, trade name, not been submitted yet, and I wanted to get it authorised in the UK for use to sell to pest management companies, then I would have to go through this approval process to be able to actually sell and supply that within the UK. It's a rigorous process, it's a very expensive process, but it's certainly worth it because it helps keep everybody safe and also the environment and wildlife. Okay, so really important that process has gone through. So when you're thinking of your suppliers, your manufacturers and your distributors, these are the things, or certainly the manufacturers, they're having to do these things and go through these approval processes for their products that they're manufacturing. Okay. So the other important bit of law or legislation that states that these things need to be done is the Food and Environment Protection Act 1985, or FEPA for short. We've probably all heard of FEPA. It's certainly involved in a lot of our early days of training. And Section 16 describes the aims of the controls that this piece of legislation wants to achieve, and that is, of course, protect the health of human beings, creatures and plants. I mentioned that just a moment ago. The protection of those things is really, really important. They want to safeguard the environment. They want to, secure, safe, efficient and humane methods of controlling pests. We need to control pests. They're a major public health issue. They can cause a lot of damage to flora and fauna, but we need secure and safe, as well as effective and humane ways of controlling these pests. Need to have good controls over that. And then lastly, to make information about pesticides available. And again, these are your labels, okay? To the public as well, these things will be available. If I was to, buy a bottle of bleach that's under my, kitchen sink, there's a label on there that I need to follow. And I can also gain extra information on that product if I need to. So FEPA, really important in terms of the controls that are in place there. Another bit of legislation, so the Control of Pesticides Regulation, or COPRA. Again, in those early days of our training, we always learned, FEPA and COPRA, they kind of go hand in hand. And really, COPRA drives the aims of FEPA. So again, hopefully we all remember the structure of legislation. We have acts of parliament, the big pieces of legislation that have the biggest clout, and give the expectations. And usually prosecutions are done under acts of parliament. But then supplementary to that are regulations that come out underneath those acts. And under FEPA, we have COPRA here. And really COPRA, it defines in more detail the types of pesticides, and also, prescribes for the approvals. So if some pesticide labels that you might read, more so insecticides at the moment, because most rodenticides have gone through a different process, which I'll go on to in a moment. You may see the mention of, approved under COPRA. Again, the labels do mention these things, so you'll see that mentioned, and allow for the conditions on sale, but also use as well. So that, again, that label is telling you how you can use that, okay, and who it can be sold to. There's some common terms that I'll bring up in a bit and share with you, and you all think, yeah, I've seen that statement on there, and that all really relates to these, general conditions for use that you see on those labels. And it's not just words that you have an option to follow if you can. It's an absolute, you must. If you don't follow them, you are breaking those label conditions and therefore breaking the law. So the other bit is, so the biocide product regulations come through European side of things. It's certainly new. It's not going to necessarily go anywhere. A lot of the rodenticides you'll see, if you compare the labels, again, some insecticides possibly have gone through this different piece of legislation. But if you look at a label of an insecticide and a label of a rodenticide, they've got slightly different registration numbers. The ones that have gone under COPRA normally have an HSE number, and the ones that have been approved under the BPR, biocidal product regulations, will have a registration, like a UK registration number. And another really important thing here is, I'm not here to talk about it in too much detail, but there is a slight difference with Northern Ireland and the rest of the devolved administrations. So Great Britain is Wales, England and Scotland, and we have the GB, biocidal product regulations, that products are authorised under. And in Northern Ireland, there is a slightly different route that has to go, and that's the EU biocidal product regulation. So any of you from Northern Ireland here, you might have heard about the differences and the things going on with regards to that slight separation in how approvals are done. Okay, so yeah, you might have heard of COPRA and BPR. They do pretty much similar things in some different detail, but generally to achieve the same thing, and that is to, approve pesticides for UK use, sale, storage, supply, etc. Okay, so hopefully that makes a bit of sense. And just as a final note, copra it keeps telling us, if you go onto the HSE website and you look up, copra, by the way, the HSE website, anybody that hasn't used it before, I do recommend it. Anything to do with health and safety, or pesticides and caution, go on the HSE website and search for what you want to know, because it's actually quite descriptive and not in a language that's kind of out of the realm of us understanding. Sometimes you think these sites are going to be complicated, but they're not. It's really, really useful, and I really do recommend it. But if you were to look up copra, you'll see on there that they keep saying that copra will be redundant one day and taken over from BPR, but of course, with all sorts of things going on at the moment, that's still happening. It takes a lot of time. It takes many years in many occasions to get products on the market. So it's important for you to understand really what your manufacturers go through to be able to get their products to market, and allow for you to have all these different options to be able to deal with pest infestations. Okay, so that's most of the legislation-y bit done. Just want to go on to a little bit more about the labels themselves. So, you can see this is a aerosol can of no description in terms of the pest industry. It's very generic, but, we're all familiar with it on the cans, whether it's a bottle or a can or a bucket. You'll normally have a label. Not normally, you will have a label on there because that's part of the regulation. And this is some of the information you can expect. So you buy a product, okay? You're buying that under the condition that you will only use it in line with the label requirements and the whole label. Now, you have to read and understand the label before use. I have been there. I've been in the industry 20 years, and when I first started out, I look back and I think, well, actually, as a technician, maybe I didn't read the label enough. Maybe I should have read it more often, and not just every now and then when I didn't have too much else to do. I've been there. I understand the way that we have to stop ourselves. We have to force ourselves to stop and go, right, I need to read these labels and understand them. Okay, but we do have to do that. We do have to do that because it's not only a legal requirement, but actually you'll learn so much about your product. And I'm sure most of you are thinking, I've read my labels, I know what they're about, but when was the last time, you had a look at that product that you use for wasps, for example? It's usually a April, May sort of period of time through to October, November, you use it, and then you have a big period of time where you don't. So, again, when it comes around to certain seasons starting where you're starting to use different products that maybe you haven't used for a while, make sure you read that label again. And if you read a label, remember, you can get a CPD point for it. You just need to tell your relevant scheme. Okay, any updates that you do in terms of your knowledge, or any learning or research you do related to product labels, make sure you register it as a CPD point. Okay, and you've got to remain within those label conditions. I say too often, we might have that query in our minds of, oh, but it doesn't say I can't do that thing, or it says I can't do that, but it's very vague, so maybe I can do that. We need to move away from those sorts of assumptions. You've got to remain within the label conditions of use, okay? And if you're not sure, you can speak to your supplier, can't you, and give them a ring, have a chat about it, and if they need to go and find you some more information, they will. And certainly we can as well. I'm a bit more limited on the, being able to talk about the specific trade name products, but certainly active ingredients, or if you've got examples, then we may be able to talk to you about it. But I really do recommend talking to your suppliers. They're great help. Okay. And again, the label is the main source of information. I mentioned we're going to talk about safety data sheets later, but really for the users, the label is the main source of information. Okay. And again, if it says something on there that you're not supposed to do, and you ask somebody and they say, oh, well, I think you can do that, don't worry about it. Don't take that. Okay. Don't, make sure, you use that label as your main source of information and you remain within the conditions. Okay. Just because, if anybody gives you advice, that you don't need to follow it, don't take that. Okay. It's my advice to you. So yeah, really important that you do these things. Really, really important. So Label contents. Generally, these are the categories of information that you'll find on, the common pesticides that we use. So the field of use, where you can use it, hospitals or maybe food prep areas. And it may also say it's not suitable for certain areas, but normally they just mention the areas that you can use it. Okay, and certainly for things like rodenticides, it'll say outside, inside, etc. But it'll give you that field of use and where you can use them. Pest type, of course, really, really important. Labels are getting a lot more strict in terms of labeling specific species with regards to their scientific name, not just their common name. So if you put things like mouse on the label, it's not that descriptive, whereas now we're seeing those scientific names coming along and giving you more direction. I'll cover that a little bit later on under the section on rodenticides. Also, the maximum minimum application rates. Again, there's usually a little table in there that says, for light infestations, mix or use this amount, or for heavy infestations, mix or use a higher amount. And it'll give you those measures. Really important that you follow these things. It's, because it's not only a legal requirement because it's on the label and that's what it says you have to do, but efficacy as well. And, how effective that's going to be. And if you're out there working, of course, you don't want to have a product that you're using and it's ineffective because of the way you've applied it or how you've mixed it. And of course, area coverage, is a really important one. Very common ones like ULVs or space treatment. It normally gives you that, detailed square foot that it would cover for the period of time that you have it going, or maybe it's a smoke generator that has a cutoff point that's automatic. It'll tell you what space it will cover. So you need to make sure you're doing those calculations, okay? Again, otherwise it could be ineffective. Training requirements, really common one. We've, of course, with rodenticides, we see that on there a lot. Must comply with the crew stewardship and must be competent and have, a relevant qualification. So it does mention training on there. Some of them, especially, insecticide way of things, it says you've got to be competent. What does that mean? I have no answer for you exactly what it is, other than if something bad happened and someone had to judge whether you were competent or not, they would probably just look at your history, look at your experience, look at what training courses you have done and see whether or not it's relevant to, the product that you were using, okay? But, whether you're competent or not. And if you're an employer, and you employ anybody, you've got to make sure that you're happy that user of that product is competent. And of course, if there's any products that say you do have to have a particular qualification, you need to make sure they have that qualification before using the product or touching it in any way, shape or form, right? Environmental protection requirements, of course, the things you need to do to make sure that chemical doesn't come into contact with anything it shouldn't. Water courses, things like that. So it does give you the information on where you shouldn't use it, and whether or not you can use it, around water courses. And it'll say that you have to make sure certain things are in place before you use it in that particular area. So that information's on there. Of course, like I mentioned, registration numbers. They're good for, sharing information with customers, or if you've got a list of all your products in a sort of COSH form or product approved product list and things like that, you'll normally have that HSE or BPR number, registration number. Remember that HSE number's COPRA and the BPR sort of registration numbers with the BPR legislation. So they mean the same things in terms of they've been authorised, it's just slightly different bodies, okay? And also, of course, active ingredient, really important, because the active ingredients, remember, this is the information you're going to need to be sharing with your customers when you're using on their site. So that's always usually at the beginning of the label as well and easy to find. So make sure you're aware of those active ingredients. And also just, treatment effectiveness, being able, this whole switching different active ingredients and using different active ingredients to make sure you're managing, or not causing any issues with resistance and efficacy and things like that. So important that you know about those active ingredients. Hazard symbols as well. Again, of course you've got to know, usually if you get a picture of a sort of a tree and a dead fish, it means that it's, hazardous to aquatic life. So, if you're in anyone's home that's got a fish tank, or you're in a garden and it is used for external use and there's a pond, you've got to make sure you protect these things and you don't allow that. So those hazard symbols do show you it. Things like carcinogenic or can harm an unborn baby, things like that. These are all the common hazard symbols you might see on there, and they're really important for when you do COSH assessments. Okay, and precautions and safety in use. That's a really key one, isn't it? Because it tells us, what gloves we need to be using, or whether we need to use gloves and respirators and coveralls, things like that. Really, really important, especially if you've got employees, and especially for yourself. You've got to keep yourself and keep other people safe and make sure that the right PPE is supplied. It will tell you on that label what's needed. Sometimes it's always not, very specific about the different grades of glove that you can get or EN numbers of gloves. But if not, then a lot of the time that is on the safety data sheet. Of course, medical advice in case something happens, someone eats something they shouldn't, or a wildlife gets hold of something that they shouldn't have got hold of that you put down, any accidental exposure, then of course the medical advice is on there on what to do and what not to do. For example, if something's swallowed, some labels and some safety data sheets will say, do not induce vomiting, because they've assessed it as inducing vomiting can make the situation worse. Whereas I don't think there's any that say you should induce vomiting. I don't think they would advise that, not particularly pleasant, but of course, that information's on there and really interesting and important for you to know. And then another key bit is disposal. So what you're supposed to do with what might be left over. Okay. So I'll say that was a brief look at, the label contents, but that's generally the information you're going to find on there that's really important for you to be aware of and, do some reading. So if you don't comply with the label, you will be breaking the law. I can guarantee you that if you don't comply with the label, and it's the user. So of course, when you've got an employer and you've got an employee, that employer is always responsible for their employee and their actions. And if any harm ever comes to them, always be responsible. But as long as you give some good training and you give the advice and you give the PPE and you make sure that user or you as a user are fully understanding of how you're meant to use that product, then if there is any issues with the use of that pesticide, then it will be that user that ultimately is up against possibly prosecution criminally, possibly civil claims and things like that. So it's the user. The user is the one that's responsible, not the employer necessarily. Slightly different thing, they are. But in terms of the use and the basic legislation, it's the user of that product. You do get health and safety legislation that's vicarious responsibility and things like that from the employer's part of things. But, as a user, make sure you know what you're doing. If you feel you haven't had enough training in a product, then speak to your employer. Okay. So some important label terms, and we're talking more rodenticide here. So for professional use only, that applies to pretty much everything that we use. There are obviously amateur use products as well out there, but I think predominantly most people on here, your stock that you might have in your van, it's going to be mostly for professional use only. Now, for rodenticides, as we know at the moment, this is not a stewardship talk or anything like that. We've done that a couple of months ago if you wanted to log on and have a look at it. But, for professional use only, there is certain training that is required. Again, you can go on the Crew website and have a look at the training and certification for that. But those professional use products are really important. They do require a certain level of training. And also the parts per million that's available, generally the 50 parts per million generally is only for professional use only. Also, another common term we see, so to be used only by professional users holding certification demonstrating compliance with UK rodenticide stewardship regime requirements. So again, I just mentioned that there, didn't I, beforehand, saying that, you're a professional user, you need to hold some certification that you're demonstrating that you comply with the Crew stewardship. And like I said, you can have a look on their website with regards to which ones they are if there is anybody here that's not quite sure whether or not you have one of those if you're new to the industry. Also, again, refer to the CRU Code of Practice for guidance. That's on the label. So remember what I said at the beginning. If something is written on a label, it is a legal requirement that you follow it. And when it says you've got to refer to the CRU UK Code of Best Practice for guidance, you have to do that. You have to work in line with that code of best practice while you are wanting to use that rodenticide. Okay, if it says it on the label, you have to do it. You have to be aware of it. Ignorance is never a defense when it comes to law and prosecutions. You know, sorry, I didn't realize that it said that on the label, that I had to follow the CRU Code of Practice. That's not an excuse. Okay, so again, these things are important. You know, do not use this product in pulse baiting treatments. Now, this isn't a broad spectrum for all rodenticides. This is just an example of what you might see on a label. I mean, again, I'm not here to talk about different baiting strategies, but you know, we have something pulse baiting, surplus baiting. So surplus baiting technique is usually used for all multi-feed anticoagulant rodenticide baits. That is all baits for which, you know, the rat or the mouse is expected to eat a lethal amount of that bait only after feeding multiple times on it. Therefore, you know, to facilitate this multiple feeding requires a surplus amount of the bait. And it needs to always be available at each and every bait point. Okay, so you know, usually for surplus baiting, you know, bait point sizes need to be larger, typically up to 200 grams, and bait replenishment needs to be, you know, undertaken more frequently, you know, to ensure that surplus amount of bait is always in place. Again, there's guidance on their visits, but that's surplus baiting. Now, some products do say, you know, that's how you need to use it, and that pulse baiting treatments is not suitable. You know, in terms of the pulse baiting, it's something usually for the higher category second generation anticoagulants like Bodifocum and things like that. Okay, so these statements are on there. This is just to give you examples of, oh, right, does it say that? Oh, it's that specific, is it? It really is. You know, the labels can be very specific in terms of what you're meant to do and what you're not meant to do, right? So again, it mentions, you know, 30 parts per million, maybe 50 parts per million, just a tiny bit on that. I think it was March 2018. Any rodenticides containing over the specific concentration limit of 30 parts per million. So anything over 30 parts per million of active ingredient must be reformulated to a lower level, or it has to be labelled as toxic to reproduction. Now, that, again, I'm not here to talk about that in detail, but, you know, there's some importance, because if you're using a product that's 50 parts per million, you know, in terms of risk assessing and cost assessing and ensuring, of course, that, you know, if there's any women that may be pregnant, of course, you know, it says toxic to reproduction. You can debate all day long whether or not it would be toxic to reproduction of someone who's, you know, sat here and the bait's over there, but it says it on the label. That's all that matters. So you need to take those precautions and do those risk assessments. Okay. So yeah, let's move on to just a little bit in terms of the importance of rodenticide label terms. So indoors and outdoors and around buildings, you know, really important. It doesn't say all of these in one go. These are just examples of what they may say. So indoors and outdoors and around building, relatively straightforward, of course, indoors. Also outdoors, so quite descriptive, and around buildings, very descriptive. Now, the open areas bit, that's always a bit of a sorry, I went back there, didn't mean to. The open areas. Now, the European Commission documented, or they describe the open areas statement as uses around farmland, parks, and maybe golf courses. You know, it really is a typical open area application. The term is also used when rodenticides are used to reduce impacts on game rearing or outside, so i.e. in the field, food stores, maybe potatoes, sugar beet plants, things like that. So yeah, the open areas, there is a definition for that. And really, most of us, as we think about it, we can kind of come to our own common sense conclusion that what an open area is. You know, it says outdoors and around buildings. Okay, so open areas means something different, doesn't it? So you can only work with rodenticides in open areas if it has that term on the label. Okay, if it says indoor and outdoor use, that doesn't necessarily mean open areas. Okay, and I know I mentioned the Crew Code of Best Practice. They do go into these different statements and what they mean. So, you know, please refer to that Crew Code of Best Practice and you know, get to know these terms. And another really important bit is pest type. So I mentioned earlier, you know, they're being more specific on the labels, and you will see now that there are no rodenticides that have, all rodenticides will only have mus musculus on there. So house mice and brown rats. So you couldn't use it for black rats or field mice or anything like that, because there are no rodenticides with that name, with that scientific name on the label. So if you're working in a property and there's, you know, say low-level mouse activity, field mice can go higher up, of course, but if you're in a kitchen and they're coming in from behind the sink, you know, that kind of typical mouse infestation in kitchens, and you pull the kickboards out, there's loads of droppings, now there's a good chance that they could be field mice. So you need to be certain that they're not before you use any rodenticide. You need to confirm which they are. So I'm not here to talk about that too much. That's another webinar for another day. But usually, you know, things like field mice will cover their food and protect their food. So if you had a bait box of non-toxic in there and a field mice was feeding from it, then they would be covering that up with miscellaneous bits of material that's around, bits of stone and insulation and things like that. They want to protect it, whereas house mice don't do that. And also, of course, if you're using traps and you catch one, you can identify it that way. And really, anyway, using non-toxic before toxic is always going to be the way you need to go. Okay, so hopefully we're doing that as a matter of course anyway. All right, but the pest type's really important that the products you're using, it says you're allowed to use it for that pest, because that is the only thing that HSE and CRD have authorised it to be used on, nothing else. You would be breaking the law if you were to use rodenticides for treating field mice. Full stop. Okay, so insecticides, a bit about rodenticides there. If you've got any more questions about rodenticide labels, please pop it in the Q&A bit and I'll see if I can answer it, see how we go with that. But just to go on to insecticides and some common terms. So like I mentioned, there is a hazard symbol, but it also states on there in writing that it can be toxic to aquatic life. So you need to make sure that you're doing things to make sure it's not going to present any risks to aquatic life. May produce an allergic reaction. So, you know, we deal with concerned members of the public sometimes ringing us about treatments that have occurred and they feel like they're getting an allergic reaction to a insecticide that's been sprayed and they're itching or coming up with welts and things. Now, we're not qualified to know whether or not that is the thing that's causing the issue, but and we obviously refer them to the GPs, but allergic reactions are a thing, and some products do state on the label that it could cause an allergic reaction. So again, you getting to know your label and which ones say things like this, you can then maybe shelve it and think, do you know what, I'll use that in certain situations where I'm confident that no humans are going to come into contact with it at all for some period of time, because I'm, it's either that or you have to ask every customer whether or not they're aware of any allergies that they have. Okay, so you've got to make sure you're aware of those sorts of terms that are on there. So, and also before, bats is a big thing. I've had loads of questions lately about bats, which is really great because we're all, making sure we're sticking in, inside the law with regards to bats in roofs. But this is a statement. All these things I've taken off of labels. I've just randomly selected a few different insecticides and taking these statements off. And one of them is, before treating any structure used by bats, you have to consult with Natural England or Scottish Natural Heritage or the Countryside Council for Wales. So you have to consult with them if you know there's bats in. I say you, really your customer It depends. And I get different pest controllers, sometimes take over responsibility of that. It's up to you what you do. But, you can't use, if you know there's bats in there, you don't do anything until the relevant authority is given guidance on what can and can't be done. And of course, if you're doing any treatments in roof spaces, that should be a question without fail every single time to your customer. Do you know if there's any bats in your roof? Even if you're treating a wasp nest from outside, using your lances to reach up to where they're entering, that could be coming out into the attic area. That wasp nest could be coming out into an attic area. And if you're potentially putting pesticide in an area where bats potentially could be, you need to not. So, those questions should be standard questions you ask when you're doing any work near any roof area. Okay. Also exclude all persons and animals during the treatment. So of course we do that anyway, don't we? But again, it says it on the label you need to do that. This isn't just stuff that you've learned in your training or you've heard one of your colleagues talking about that, you need to get all people out. And it's common sense though, isn't it, really, that you get people and animals out of the area. But yeah, of course it is, but it's also law. It's also said on the label you have to exclude all persons and animals during the treatment. And normally it says, until the area is dry, something like that. It won't tell you how many hours because you need to make that judgment based on the environment. And again, for use only by professional operators. If it doesn't have that statement, then a lot of the time it is available for amateurs to purchase. But again, all the things that you've got, hopefully, is for professional operators only. And normally with insecticides, it's not as descriptive about what training or what qualification you need to have. It's just a competency thing. And like I mentioned at the beginning, competency is common sense and what it is, isn't it? Experience and skills and miscellaneous training you may have had throughout the months or years that you're working. And when you think to yourself, if I was in court or my employee was in court and they were saying, right, are you competent? You could go, yes, here's the things that I've done. Here's my experience and I am a competent person. Okay, so just a few more here. So do not store mixed spray overnight. Now that's in terms of when you mix up a spray into your 5 litre or 1 litre or 2 litre spray, or whatever it is. If you get to the end of the day and you've still got some left over, maybe you haven't measured it quite properly for the job that you had in hand. Remember that area coverage that it says in the application rates. Maybe you've mixed a bit too much. Some of them do say don't store it overnight. You can't store it, so you need to decant it into a waste container that's labelled properly and dispose of it. You shouldn't be storing it overnight in your sprayer, and a lot of products specifically say that. Unprotected persons and animals must stay away until dry. Again, I mentioned that earlier, didn't I? That's another statement from a different pesticide before that's a tiny bit more descriptive with regards to until it's dry. Some areas it may be half an hour it's drying because it's a nice warm hot day and there's a breeze blowing through. Then it may dry quicker than say on a wet, wintry, cold day where maybe there's no heating on. Do not breathe as well, of course. Do not breathe vapor or spray. Again, it might be common sense, but it says don't do that. So we need to think about our PPE and RPE that we've got. Only use in well-ventilated areas. That's another statement. Again, this isn't focusing on one particular product. I think this is generally things that occur on labels. Some labels might not say this wording specifically, but these are examples and things to hopefully get you thinking and get you sort of considering, right, yeah, there's a ton of different statements on labels. I need to get to know my product a bit better. But again, only use in well-ventilated areas. And then the last one before we go on to safety data sheets, do not apply to clothing or human bedding. Now, I say a lot on occasions with bed bugs, for example, where treatments are carried out in the bedroom and a customer has called and said, they've sprayed my bed frame, but they've also sprayed, my mattress and, some of the bedding and things like that. And of course, products will say a lot of the time, specifically, do not apply to clothing or human bedding. If that happens, you are breaking the label. And, could be consequences if the wrong people report it to the right authorities. Okay. Great, okay, blimey. Got 15 minutes left, crazy. I've only got a couple of slides left here. I'm not going into a massive amount of detail with safety data sheets, but generally you might recognize what these look like here. Very detailed. They can be very, anything from 4 or 5 pages to 12 or 15 pages, depending on the product. But this is the manufacturer's COSH information. This is not a COSH, This is not a COSH assessment that a user or that a user of a pesticide would call a COSH assessment that they've carried out, because of course it's not. It's the manufacturer's details on the product, everything from what you do if a fire breaks out, or what you do if you spill it. Just going on to the next page here, these are the sorts of things that they mention on there. So safe use and potential hazards. So the label and the safety data sheets do actually merge sometimes. You can get similar information, but the safety data sheet will give more chemical information and specific cleanup requirements if it was to spill in any way, and also first aid measures. So it'll give you more detail on specific areas relating to that chemical compound. But as I said, it gives you safe use and potential hazards, spill handling. So again, what you need to have in place to be able to clean it up and what you do with it afterwards, the environmental risks, and also the LD50, lethal dose 50%. So they've got those statistics on there, those numbers on there, and it gives you an idea of what that LD50 is, or not an idea, it tells you what the LD50 is. Anybody that doesn't know what LD50 is, haven't got time to explain it today, but please go and do a little bit of research and have a read, and again, get a CPD point. Also, is a breakdown of actives and formulations. So, it'll tell you what's in it, what formulations in there, the active ingredients, everything about that product, how it's put together, and all the different elements that's in there to make it the product it is. So the safety data sheet has its uses. Okay, it's maybe not a day-to-day thing we'll be reading through, but you certainly do use it for particular things like COSH assessment. So the document lists this information relating to occupational safety and health for the users of these various substances. And as a final bit, it's important. So a COSH assessment. Now, this is a quote from, again, the HSE website. Go and have a look. But you need a COSH assessment whenever you are using, creating, or producing a substance within the workplace that could be hazardous to health. So we're users of substances that could be hazardous to health, full stop. That's what pesticides are. They could be hazardous to health, okay? So you have to do a COSH assessment. Now, if you have 5 or more employees, you have to record it. But even if you have fewer than that, it makes sense to write down what steps you have taken to identify the risks. And the really important part is making a list of the actions you are taking to, control the risks to health. Even if you are under 5 employees, maybe you don't do as, your COSH assessment is in a different type of document, or, you may feel that you don't need to record it down because that's what the HSE say. But the HSE also, I'm quoting them, they do say that even if you have less than 5 employees, it makes sense to write it down. If something was to happen and you couldn't produce a COSH assessment, you could still get yourself into some hot water, okay? There is no reason why you wouldn't do a COSH assessment, even if it's just yourself in a company. And also certainly even if you've got 1 employee or 2 employees, doing a COSH assessment makes you look at the label, makes you look at the safety data sheet and go, right, and you'll see all these things I've mentioned. You'll be like, oh yeah, okay, it says this, it says that. And I'm not a big fan of that one because it says it's got, a higher risk of causing dermatitis to skin. So, I'm going to shelve that one and only use it in situations that we really need to, or, I'm going to make sure the PPE and training on that product is better, or not better, but more involved than maybe the other products. Again, you're making all the decisions yourself, but, that COSH assessment is basically one document combining the label and the safety data sheet. If I've got, my pesticide here, this is my water bottle, and I'm like, right, I need to do a COSH assessment on this. I'm going to get my safety data sheet here. I'm going to get my label, that side of me, and I'm going to fill out this document about this product by using the label and the safety data sheet to answer the questions. Who's the manufacturer? What's the active ingredient? What's the first aid measures? What are you going to do to control these hazards? How are you going to protect your staff? And you look at these products because it's really important. Okay. And again, as I said, during that process, I remember a company I first went to that I was supervising, and I realised there wasn't really many cost assessments at all. And I thought, right, my project, I'm going to get a cost assessment for all of these products that we're using. Now, that was a revelation to me because, yes, okay, you might think, Natalie, that couldn't have been much fun. But it depends what type of person you are. But of course, it was something I needed to do. And I actually found that it was invaluable to me because I learned so much about pesticides in that 2-day project than I had done in the previous 13 years of experience, because I was properly reading these labels. I was properly reading my safety data sheets. And that's just beneficial to everybody. And then you combine that knowledge into a cost assessment. And we went from about 40 different products that we were using down to about 10, because the cost assessing process, I was like, don't need that. Or I don't like that one. That's too hazardous. Or we've got 2 of those different products, so we don't need that one. So, and of course, when you chuck it in the bin, you dispose of it properly through the proper routes, through consignment notes and transfer notes and all that. But, it helped us reduce it to a level that was more manageable and of less risk to everybody. And the training was easier to do. So really important thing, okay? If you want to talk about cost assessments anymore, then give us a call, get some training on it. I think we do some free micro learning for members as well, if you want to do that. If we don't, then I'm not liable for that statement. Just ring me. I can have a chat to you about it. Okay. Right. I think we're ready for questions. I think I did okay there. We've got 10 minutes left officially. Let me stop sharing. There we go. And we have 7 questions. I reckon we'll get to them. We'll see how involved they are and how much I go on, really. Okay, good. So this was a really early on question. I'll read it out and we'll just see whether we covered it or not already. So this is from Anonymous. Do all rodenticide tubs have to have all relevant labels on them whilst in transit in the van and on jobs, or is just a yellow warning sticker enough, please? That is an amazing question. I wish I knew who you were, because that is a great question, really important. So if you buy your rodenticide and insecticide, you don't read a can insecticide, so let's stick it to rodenticide. If you buy a tub from your supplier, it's got the labels on there, okay? Brilliant. That is a legal requirement. That product has to have a label on it. So not only is a legal requirement that you have to comply with that as a user, but the supplier and the manufacturer of that product also has a legal requirement to make sure that label is there so that the user can follow it. Now, if you want at any point, if you're allowed to, because the label does sometimes say that the product's not suitable for decanting, possibly, but if it is suitable for decanting and you put it into another container because it's smaller and more compact and easier to carry, thinking about manual handling and things like that, then you have to put a label on it. A warning sticker, a yellow warning sticker is not enough. You have to have the active ingredient, the trade name, the registration number, all these things, but you need to print off another label. Your suppliers can help you with that. You can download one, print it off at home, stick it on your tub. You need to have that label on there, okay? Have a chat to your supplier how you do that, what product you do. But to answer your question, a yellow warning sticker is not enough, okay? In the UK, I don't know where you are. I'm assuming UK, but certainly in the UK, it is not enough. Okay, so from Ben Cartwright here, requirement on labels on show in retail environment. You dislike seeing labels on shelf and in customer-facing positions. I think that's what you're saying. So I think previous question kind of answered that. The labels, when you say labels, requirement of labels on show in retail environment, I mean, labels are there. If you're selling a product and it's on a shelf, the label's attached to the product. So it's always going to be on show, isn't it? You can't take that label off until you've sold it and then put, you need to leave that label on there. The only time to take a label off of a tub, for example, is when that tub's completely empty and maybe you're thinking about reusing that tub for storing things, and you need to take that label off, and you can always keep it if you can for any other products of similar nature that you may get. Okay, great. So I think that did answer the previous one. Let me know if it didn't. So Caitlin here, regarding disposal, I've heard in 2023, the UK will be requiring 100% recyclable plastics and products. We have pesticides in aerosol cans. Is there any way we can recycle insecticides without breaking the law? Or what's the alternative way around the new laws? I mean, when it comes to recyclables and plastics and disposals and the legislation around what's possibly happening for manufacturers to do, I'm not the best one to ask. I think if you speak to your supplier, they will answer that a lot better than I ever will. At the end of the day, what's available to you is available. And then in terms of the aerosols, you've got aerosol cans. Is there any way we can recycle insecticide without? I mean, aerosol, it's not something you can recycle. So I've done a webinar last in December on waste disposal, if you wanted to go and have a look at it. It does talk a little bit about the hierarchy of waste, and that you prevent creating waste, and if you do create waste, then can you reuse it, so like a plastic tub that you could use for something else, or you can reuse it. But also another term that we really can't normally do is recycle or rehabilitate, something like that, because that's not what we do. We're not manufacturers. We can't do that with an aerosol that we've got. We can't do anything other than dispose of it. Again, I'm not going to go into codes and stuff. I nearly did then, but that's on a webinar I done last month. So go on to old webinars and you'll see on there and hopefully ask the question. And Caitlin, if you wanted to have a chat about that a bit more, email and give more specific information, then I can maybe help a lot more. But in terms of the 2023 and the recycling plastics and products, have a chat to your manufacturers about that. Okay. I think hopefully that answered it. Yeah, hopefully it did. I'm not overly pleased with the answer that I gave for that one, but it's tricky when I'm not quite that side of things. Do we receive the slides afterwards? No, but this presentation is available on our website under webinars, and then at the top you can see a little bar that says old webinars. And if you go on there, you can just rewatch this whenever you want to. But no, the slides are not available. I worked hard on these slides, or Kat did. I just put some words on the slide and she made it look lovely. So, but you can watch the webinar again. So bats, this is from Anonymous. Does using rodenticides within a potential bat roost carry the same need to contact Natural England? So actually, we've got a great article. I don't know if Kat's as prepared as, I'm not going to say, she's definitely going to put a link in the chat section for you, but we do have an article that was done, it was a couple of years ago, but it's still relevant, that we done alongside or with the Bat Conservation Trust, and they gave some great guidance on what we can do and what we can't do in attics, for example, or where there might be bat roosts, and they in detail covered the use of rodenticides. And basically, as long as you're confident it's out of the way and has no detrimental effect to the bats that are in there, you can use it. But there's certain things they put in there. There we go. I think I've just seen Kat pop up the link to that article. So have a read of it, really useful. And then you can make your own judgment based on your site-specific conditions. Okay, Dean, so what's the BPCA doing to prevent professional use only insecticides and rodenticides being sold on eBay? Well, Dean, there could be another link that could pop up here. So just FYI. So we have been working with eBay, the Crop Protection Association and the BPCA collaboratively, have worked with eBay, have gone to see their offices in Europe somewhere. I can't remember where. It wasn't myself. It was my colleague, D. Ward Thompson, our technical membership or head of technical membership. And they've got in place a reporting process for reporting the selling or the illegal selling of professional use insecticides and rodenticides. So keep an eye out for that link that we're going to put up. Again, you can go onto our website and just search eBay at the top, and it'll bring you up all the articles we've got on it. So we've worked very hard at creating that relationship. And there is a reporting process that you can go through. We actually have a guidance document on the reporting process, probably only available for members. But again, Kat will give you a link to that article, hopefully. If doesn't get round to it, she can't find it, I'm not putting you under pressure, Kat, I promise. So everyone just pop a general email into the technical@bpca.org.uk and just say, oh, Natalie, you mentioned about this eBay stuff you've been doing. Can you send me the information, and I'll stick it on an email to you, okay? So yeah, we are working with that, Dean, I promise you. How long can you leave mixed blah, blah, blah in a sprayer? So Trevor, I can't really comment on products specifically. Chat to your supplier, and it would tell you on the label. Now, generally, for any insecticide, when you mix it up, the professional guidance is a full stop piece of guidance. Mix up what you need and no more. Now, obviously, in the occasions, of course, we've all done it. You know, we've misjudged an area, and maybe we've got a little bit left in the sprayer. Then you decant that and get rid of it. Now, that's my official advice. But have a chat, read your label, and have a chat to your supplier as well. And again, they better give you more detail with regards to specific products. Fabulous. We've got 5 questions. We've got a couple of minutes left, but we'll keep going. So I appreciate everyone sticking with us. If you do need to rush off because we're coming towards the official time end, then of course, please do. I won't be offended. But anybody who wants to stick around, I'm going to be on here another 5 or 10 minutes just to cover these last 5 questions. Is there a cost? Cost question. So is cost assessment course you advised to learn from? Is there a cost assessment course? So we've got stuff like micro learning. They're usually sort of 10, 15 minutes, maybe half an hour, quick online courses, only available to members. But we do some bespoke training as well. So just get in touch with our training department, go onto our website, look at training and qualifications. We've got a big list there of the things that we do. And if there's something on there we don't do, you want us to do, just let us know. Okay. Pretty sure I've done a webinar on cost assessments before as well. So yeah, there is lots there. Just have a look. Cosh is a very common thing that training is required for. So have a search around. Okay, so what about mode of action categories to manage resistance? Yeah, I mean, today wasn't really to talk about rodenticides or insecticides mode of action, or MOA in the way that they actually target that pest to kill it. So whether it's a anticoagulant or it's a narcotic, or different categories of mode of action. It's not something I wanted to talk about today because it's not really for today. But we do have a resistance training course that you can go on. Again, training, BPCA website. You better see it on there, and you can learn a lot more about resistance management. I done a webinar some time ago on bed bugs. I think it was 2 years ago, and I talked a bit about resistance management and the different ways that insecticide could cause resistance, or the way the bugs, the insects, have created a resistance to that insecticide. It's a very long conversation that I actually had, so not for today, but we do have a course on managing resistance. Okay, have a look up and give us an email if you can't find it. So Anthony, sorry, off topic, but I forgot to add my CPD details on registration. Can I send them on here, please? Anthony, no, you can't. No, tell you what, best way to do it, so I don't register it. So if you pop an email over to, do you know what, pop it to technical@bpca.org.uk, just say, Natalie, didn't add my CPD, can you add it please? And I will pop it to the relevant Katrina. Oh, there we go. Kat's just put up. Okay, don't send it to technical. Send it to registered@bpca.org.uk, and Katrina there, our CPD guru, she'll help you out on getting those added, and she'll be asking us to confirm that you were here, Anthony. So we might do a quiz with you first to see if you've remembered everything I've said. We won't. I've still got 5 questions left. Look, sorry guys, but I know some of you have had to shoot off, but yeah, good 280 of you are still with me, so great. Alistair, some insecticide products such as a certain dust, I won't mention it, say for professional use on them, would somebody without a qualification still be able to purchase it, or is it still left down to a user deciding that they're competent enough? Good question. So the suppliers, you'll find that generally your suppliers, the professional suppliers, the ones that, are manufacturers and distributors that are members of the BPCA, and even those that are not, if they're a professional supplier, before they sell any professional use products, be it insecticides or rodenticides, they will gain the relevant information they need to be confident that that person is competent. Now, of course, with rodenticides, it's straightforward. It's, is a certain certification that's needed. There's a list of certifications. If someone wanting to buy that rodenticide hasn't got it, they won't sell it to them. And then in terms of the stuff that doesn't have specific qualifications associated with them, each supplier will have their own competency checks, usually. Now, in terms of the use of it, of course, if somebody was to use a product and they're not competent because they've started in pest control yesterday and they've managed to buy something, that says professional use on it only, and they do something wrong and cause some harm and end up in court, then yes, they'll be deemed, they're deemed incompetent to use that product, then there will be repercussions. So can be convoluted, but hopefully that's kind of answered it there. Suppliers generally do the checks. And then also, if someone does manage to get hold of something they should use it in a bad way, they'll be in trouble for it if they were caught. Ed here, I believe plastics are being banned only refers to single-use plastic and not all plastics. Great, thank you for that, Ed. Hopefully the person who asked that question is still here and got that information. But yeah, that makes more sense, doesn't it? The single-use stuff, straws and things like that. I think the single-use, I suppose insecticide bottles would, I suppose, are they single-use? I guess so. Don't know, that's another topic for another day. Not my topic. So anonymous here, what are the risks to businesses of technicians not reading labels? So really brief, I'm quite passionate about this bit, so I've got to keep myself under control. So if I'm an employer and I've got my employee with me and I just say, you'll figure it out for yourself, don't need to worry, read the label if you can, but don't worry about it too much. And it's just a verbal thing, and maybe give them some verbal direction, but that's about it. And they go out, something happens, turns out the technician had no idea what they were doing because they didn't read the label, and the company and maybe the individual ends up in front of courts. Then there could be two categories of prosecution or civil claims. So there'll be one directed at the company for not training their technician properly or being able to prove that they've trained them properly. There's no toolbox talks or team meetings or induction training that can be evidenced, then the employer can get in trouble. And then also as the user, it really depends how much trouble they get into. But sometimes if it is seen that, all the fault was of the employer, then the fault will stay with the employer. But if there was guidance that was given and it is evidenced given to the technician, but that technician decided not to follow it because they couldn't be bothered, then you as an employer will be less liable and the technician will be more liable because they've chosen not to actually put into practice the information you have given to them. Hopefully I'm going to keep it at that. Hopefully that makes sense. Two more questions. Do you have a cost assessment template to get an idea of the ones on the right lines? Absolutely, Richard. You're a member, I think. Yeah, I know your name. So log in. You'll see Business Shield. So we've got Business Shield there, 1,000,001 different templates on there. So there are cost assessments on Business Shield that are product specific, that are already populated for you. You need to put your own touch to it as well, but they're populated for the different products you have. And then anything that you can't see in there that's relevant to you, then you can download a blank copy. So yeah, Business Shield, cost assessments, all there. Get in touch if you can't see it. One more question. So you talked about not using mixed chemicals or bait the next day. So how do we deposit them? So again, in the UK, you don't deposit them anywhere other than through a proper disposal scheme. So of course we can't deposit them down a drain or a sink. That's completely against environmental legislation. So if we have a sprayer and it's got half a litre left in there and you're like, yeah, I can't use that again because it's just not going to be effective, then you need to decant it into a container that's used for disposing of liquid insecticide. You label that and then you get a competent contractor to come and collect it and dispose of it. So yeah, you can't deposit it anywhere. You just need to dispose of it. Obviously, if you can use up insecticide on a job at a site on that day, that's what you need to do, as long as it's being used for a purpose and it's not just, I'm going to dispel this insecticide because I don't want it in it anymore and it's not being used for a particular purpose. Okay, blimey, that was Good. So I'm 8 minutes over. I've still got 250 of you stuck with me, so that's great. Appreciate you doing that. Just as a FYI to everybody, because some of you might have missed this, but our next webinar in February will be done by our new technical officer, John Horsley. We'll be sharing the responsibilities of webinars. John is amazing. He's got great experience with training, great information. He's talking about legislation in pest control. So tiny bit similar to today, but more generic about all the different bits you need to be aware of when you're out there doing a whole ton of different pest management. Okay, I was very specific today. John's going to be much more wide covering. So yeah, you'll be seeing John next time. I might be there as support, might do, but yeah, you'll definitely enjoy it. And please get signed up to that webinar so you can get some of these questions into John and give him a good test. All right, great. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic day. All stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.